He lied to protect what he feared losing the most. She believed in the truth he only pretended to live. What started as an experiment turned into real feelings, and when the lie collapsed, one move she made changed everything. Before you find out what she did that left a millionaire stunned. Don't forget to subscribe and share this love story. The reflection in the mirror seemed to belong to someone else. Michael Henry Castle adjusted his thick-framed glasses and ran his hand through his deliberately disheveled hair. The simple clothes, faded jeans and a basic t-shirt, completed the look of an ordinary man, very different from the image that usually graced business magazines. As he settled into the wheelchair, he mentally rehearsed the story he would tell. This wasn't the first time he had done this. In fact, this would be the 5th date arranged through the dating app, where his profile showed only a 38-year-old administrative employee physically disabled after an accident. No mention of Castle Enterprises, the billion-dollar fortune, or the dozens of companies he commanded. "Sir, everything is ready," informed Roger, his personal driver and security guard of more than a decade. "The car is waiting. Are you sure you don't want me to stay nearby this time?" Michael shook his head. "Like the other times, I'll go alone. I'll be back in a few hours." The journey to the cafe in the city center was made in silence. Michael observed through the window the city that he had, in part, helped build through his investments. Corporate buildings, hospitals, schools. Some of these constructions carried the Castle family name. Others remained discreetly under his control, without flaunting the brand. "Drop me off a block before," he instructed the driver. "I'll return to the same spot in 2 hours." Taking control of the wheelchair, Michael headed to the cafe indicated in the app. The place was simple, cozy, with wooden tables and plants hanging from the ceiling. Nothing like the starred restaurants he frequented, for business dinners, and that was exactly what pleased him. Upon entering, his eyes scanned the environment in search of a 34-year-old woman with brown hair, according to the description. His gaze stopped at a table in the back, where she was sitting, leafing through a book. Unlike the other women he had met, this one wasn't obsessively checking her phone or looking at the door every moment. Michael took a deep breath and approached, maneuvering the chair with precision between the tables. "Helen?" he asked as he got close. She raised her eyes from the book and smiled, a genuine smile, without the shock or poorly disguised discomfort that he was already used to seeing. "Michael? Nice to meet you." She extended her hand in a simple greeting without hesitation. "Did you find the place easily?" "Yes, no problems. Actually, I know this area of the city quite well." He positioned the chair on the other side of the table. "I loved your suggestion to meet here. I work at a school not far away and often come to grade papers at this cafe. Their mint tea is wonderful." Something about her uncomplicated manner disconcerted him. There were no questions about his physical condition, nor that condescending tone he so detested. She simply talked to him as if they were two people getting to know each other, which in theory was exactly what should be happening. "You mentioned you're a teacher, right?" he asked, trying to follow the script he had prepared. "Yes, I teach literature at a public elementary school. It's not the most well-paid job in the world, but every time I see a student discovering the joy of reading—" She paused, her eyes genuinely shining. "I wouldn't trade it for anything." Helen spoke passionately about her work. She told of reading incentive projects she developed with few resources, about troubled students she had won over through books, about the difficulties of the public education system. Not once did she ask about his profession, or how much he earned, or details about the accident that had left him in a wheelchair. When the waitress approached, Helen ordered her usual mint tea, while Michael opted for an espresso. "And that book?" he asked, pointing to the volume she had placed on the table. "Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Love in the Time of Cholera. I'm rereading it for the 3rd time." She laughed, a light, genuine sound. "There are books we never finish reading, aren't there? With each reading, we discover something new." Michael smiled, surprised to be genuinely interested in the conversation. "To be honest, I've never read it. I'm more into biographies and history books." "That's a shame. Marquez has this incredible ability to transform the everyday into something magical." She paused and added, But real stories have their charm. 2. What was the last biography you read? He hesitated. He had recently finished the biography of a technology magnate, but that didn't match the character he was playing. Winston Churchill, he improvised, remembering a book he had read years ago. The conversation flowed naturally to literature, history, movies. Helen had no pretensions of impressing him. She spoke with simplicity and intelligence about various subjects, listening with genuine attention when he expressed himself. Michael noticed that little by little, his defensive posture was dissolving. "And your family?" he asked, following the mental script he had prepared for all previous dates. Helen's smile diminished slightly. "It's just me and my mother now. My father left us when I was 12 years old. He simply went out to buy cigarettes and never came back." She paused, sipping her tea. "My mother worked 2 jobs to raise me and pay for my education. Today she has early-stage Alzheimer's. I live with her and take care of her." There was no self-pity in her voice, just a serene acceptance of the circumstances. Michael felt a pang of guilt for the charade he was playing. "That must be difficult," he commented, genuinely moved. "Some days are more complicated than others. She was always my safe harbor, you know. Now it's my turn to be hers." Helen brushed a strand of hair from her face. "And you? Do you have family in the city?" The question caught him off guard. In the other dates, the women were so busy talking about themselves or pretending interest in his supposed disability that they rarely asked genuine personal questions. "My parents passed away a few years ago. I have a sister, but she lives abroad," he replied, keeping as close as possible to the truth. His sister Lucy really did live in London, managing the European branch of the family business. "I'm sorry about your parents," Helen said, with sincerity in her eyes. "It must be lonely at times." The observation hit him like a punch to the stomach. That was exactly how he felt, deeply lonely, even surrounded by people all the time. Assistants, businessmen, flatterers, suitors interested in his fortune. Time passed quickly. When Michael discreetly checked his watch, he realized that almost 2 hours had gone by. He needed to end the date before Roger appeared looking for him. "I have to go," he said, feeling strangely reluctant. "I have an appointment soon." "Of course," Helen smiled, closing her book. "It was a pleasure to meet you, Michael." "The pleasure was mine," he replied automatically, but realized that for the first time he truly felt that way. When he was about to move away, Helen surprised him. "My students are preparing a poetry presentation for next week. It's nothing grand, just a small project we've developed. But if you're interested, you'd be welcome. The children would be happy to have an audience." Michael hesitated. This wasn't in the plans. His previous dates always followed the same pattern: a coffee, an uninteresting conversation, and confirmation of his theory that no one would accept him as he was without his money and power. "Sure," he replied, surprising himself. "Can you give me the address and time?" As they said goodbye, Michael felt something different. In previous dates, he left with a mixture of disappointment and bitter confirmation of his expectations. This time, there was a feeling of lightness, almost hope. While waiting for Roger at the agreed corner, his phone vibrated. Work messages, problems in one of the companies that demanded his immediate attention, rescheduled meetings. Reality was calling him back. The driver arrived punctually. Opening the rear door, Michael left the wheelchair outside for Roger to store in the trunk and entered the car with agility, without any difficulty. "How was it, sir?" asked Roger, as he drove back to the mansion on the outskirts of the city. Michael observed the urban landscape through the window, thoughtful. "Different," he replied simply. That night in his office at the castle mansion, Michael was reviewing financial reports when he caught himself thinking about Helen, about her authentic simplicity, the way she talked about her mother, her students, the books. No ostentation, no attempt to impress. His private cell phone rang, not the number he used for dates, but his real phone, known only to family members and high-ranking executives. "Michael Castle," he answered, automatically assuming the authoritative tone he used in business. "Michael, it's Morrow from Coastal Development. We need to close that property in Newport by tomorrow, or we lose it to the Chinese. I've already authorized the payment. Paul from legal has the documentation ready. If there's any problem, Let me know immediately." The conversation was brief and objective, as his professional interactions usually were. When he hung up, Michael contemplated the framed photograph on his desk, him standing next to his father, both in formal attire, at the inauguration of Castle Enterprises headquarters. Edward Castle had built an empire from nothing, starting from a small construction company to form one of the largest conglomerates in the country. Michael had grown up in the shadow of that imposing man, learning early on that power and money were the true measures of value. "Never trust anyone who approaches you, son," his father used to say. "They don't want you. They want what you have." Michael had believed these words all his life. The failed relationships always seemed to confirm the theory, until the accident 3 years ago when the helicopter in which he was traveling had to make an emergency landing. He emerged unscathed, but his girlfriend at the time, Veronica, upon hearing about the accident and believing he might have become paraplegic, simply disappeared. When he fully recovered, she returned with 1,000 excuses, but the message was clear. That's when the idea of dates with the wheelchair came up, a way to test if anyone could be interested in him without his money, without his power, with an apparent physical limitation. The 4 previous dates had ended exactly as expected, with poorly disguised disinterest, discomfort, or worse, with that condescending tone used with children or the incapable. Helen had been different. No prejudice, no morbid curiosity, no sign that his supposed disability bothered her. Just 2 adults talking, getting to know each other, sharing ideas. Michael put away the financial reports and opened his laptop. He typed her full name in, the search engine, Helen Silver. He found her modest professional profile, some articles about educational projects she had developed, photos of school awards. Nothing extraordinary for the business world, but impressive in its own context. Next to the laptop, the invitation to her students' poetry presentation, a simple event at a public school in a peripheral neighborhood, totally outside his usual universe. Michael hesitated, thinking about his packed schedule, the important meetings, the millions involved in his daily decisions. Then, surprising himself, he picked up the phone and called his secretary. "Claudia, I need you to reschedule my appointments for next Thursday afternoon." For a moment he considered telling Helen the truth before the presentation, explaining who he really was, apologizing for the lie, trying to start over with honesty. But fear paralyzed him. What if she was like all the others? What if, upon discovering his fortune, she completely changed? Worse yet, what if she despised him for the charade, for the manipulation? "Just one more date," he murmured to himself. "I just need to be sure." What Michael didn't know was that this decision would change his life in ways that neither his money nor his power could predict. The mask he had created to protect himself was slowly beginning to suffocate the man behind it, and Helen, unknowingly, held the key to free him, or to lock him definitively in his own lie. The building of Lincoln Public School contrasted drastically with the environments Michael frequented. Peeling walls, some poorly erased graffiti, a simple courtyard with trees trying to survive amid the concrete. Even so, there was something welcoming about the place, perhaps the colorful drawings on the windows or the sound of children's laughter, echoing through the corridors. Michael maneuvered the wheelchair carefully up the improvised access ramp. He had dismissed Roger, taking a regular taxi to the location. He wore discreet clothes, chinos, a simple button-up shirt, the same thick-framed glasses he wore during his meetings with Helen. At the school entrance, a woman of approximately 60 was organizing the line of excited children. "May I help you, sir?" she asked, looking at Michael with curiosity. "I've come for Miss Silver's poetry presentation," he replied, feeling strangely nervous, like a teenager. The woman's face lit up. "Ah, you must be Michael. Helen mentioned that a friend would be coming. I'm Margaret, the school principal. The presentation will be in the auditorium, if we can call that multi-purpose room an auditorium." She laughed without embarrassment. "Come, I'll take you." As they walked through the corridors, Michael carefully observed the details. Classrooms with desks worn from use, old ceiling fans, traditional blackboards instead of the digital whiteboards, that his foundation had installed in private schools in the region. Still, there was an atmosphere of dedication everywhere. Carefully mounted murals of student work, banners celebrating small school achievements, inspirational phrases painted on the walls. "Helen works miracles with the little we have," commented Margaret, as if reading his thoughts. "Would you believe she buys books with her own salary to lend to the students? We have a tiny library, but thanks to her, our children are reading more than many elite schools." Michael felt a pang in his chest. His foundation donated millions, annually to educational causes, but always for large projects, for institutions that could display the castle logo at glamorous events. He had never thought about small schools like this, where teachers like Helen fought daily with minimal resources. The auditorium was a larger room with plastic chairs organized in rows. At the back, a small improvised stage with faded red curtains. Children between 10 and 12 years old ran from one side to the other, some holding sheets of paper, others helping to put up posters on the walls. And then he saw her. Helen was in the center, coordinating the chaos with admirable calm. She wore a simple, flowery dress and had her hair pulled back in an unpretentious bun. She didn't wear elaborate makeup or expensive jewelry. She was so different from the women who circulated in his social environment. When their eyes met, she smiled, that same authentic smile that had disarmed him at the cafe. She left the group of children for a moment and came to meet him. "Michael, I'm so glad you came," she said with genuine joy. "I hope you don't regret it. It's nothing sophisticated, but the children are very excited." "I'm sure it will be great," he replied, surprising himself with his own sincerity. "I managed to save a place in the front row for you," she indicated an empty chair, "so you'll be more comfortable and can see better." The gesture touched him. It wasn't condescension, it was simply consideration. Michael positioned the wheelchair in the indicated space, while Helen returned to organize her students. Gradually, the auditorium filled up. Parents, grandparents, younger siblings, an entire community gathered to support the children. Michael felt out of place, like an intruder observing a world to which he didn't belong. But he also experienced a curious sensation of belonging, something he rarely felt at social events full of people from his own circle. The lights dimmed, and Principal Margaret took to the small stage to start the presentation. She spoke simply about the importance of reading, praised Helen's work, and presented the poetry project they had developed throughout the semester. "Each child chose a feeling and wrote their own poetic interpretation," explained Margaret. "You'll say that, even though they're young, our students have a lot to say about the world." The presentations began. One by one, the children took to the stage, some confident, others visibly nervous. They recited their poems about love, sadness, hope, fear, universal feelings filtered through their still short life experiences, but already marked by challenges that many privileged adults would never face. Michael found himself genuinely moved. A thin boy spoke about the courage of his father, who woke up at 4 in the morning to work in construction. A girl with colorful braids recited a poem about her grandmother, who was raising 5 grandchildren alone. Another boy with sad eyes and a firm voice spoke about absence, a father he never knew, a void that no word could fill. Throughout, Helen remained beside the stage, encouraging with her gaze, whispering words of encouragement, applauding enthusiastically. Michael observed her as much as the children, fascinated by the genuine dedication, the real connection she established with each student. The last presentation was by a girl of approximately 11 years old, curly hair and a shy smile. Her theme was truth. "Truth is like water," she began, with a trembling voice that gained confidence, "clear when nothing contaminates it. It slips through your fingers when you try to hold it. It quenches the thirst of those who are sincerely thirsty. It drowns those who try to deceive it." Michael felt as if each word was directed at him, as if the child could see through his charade. The guilt he had been trying to ignore grew even more. At the end, all the students went up on stage for a collective thank you. The auditorium exploded in applause. Proud parents took photos with simple cell phones. Grandparents discreetly wiped away tears. Younger siblings ran through the central corridor. Helen came down from the stage and approached Michael. "So, what did you think?" she asked, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. "Amazing," he replied sincerely. "Your children are talented." "They are, aren't they? And what you saw here is just a fraction of what they could do if they had more opportunities, more resources." The conversation was interrupted by a gray-haired lady who approached, leaning on a cane. Her face was marked by time, but her eyes were incredibly similar to Helen's. "Mom, I'm so glad you could make it." Helen hugged her affectionately. "This is Michael, a friend I met recently." The lady looked at Michael with quiet curiosity. She extended her hand for a greeting. "Pleased to meet you, young man. I'm Dorothy." Michael shook her hand delicately. "The pleasure is mine, ma'am." "Your daughter is an amazing teacher," he added, feeling the need to say something truthful. Amid so many lies, Dorothy's eyes lit up. "She always was special. Since she was little, she said she wanted to teach. She could have chosen more lucrative professions. She has the intelligence for it, but she insisted on following her heart." She paused, as if trying to organize her thoughts. "I'm sorry, sometimes I get lost in what I'm saying." Helen touched her mother's arm gently. "It's okay, Mom. Let's find Principal Margaret. She wanted to talk to you." Before walking away, Helen turned to Michael. "Can we talk more after I organize everything? It will take about half an hour." "Of course, no problem. I can wait," he replied, more eager to continue the conversation than he would like to admit. As Helen walked away with her mother, Michael observed his surroundings. Parents gathered in small groups, chatting animatedly. Children ran through the space, free. From the tension of the presentation, it was a world so distant from his own, without pretensions, without power games, without the constant need to impress. One of the children who had presented, the boy who had recited the poem about absence, approached the wheelchair timidly. "Hi, sir, are you a friend of Mrs. Silver?" Michael smiled. "Yes, I'm her friend. She's the best teacher in the world," the boy stated, with the absolute conviction that only children possess. "She taught me that I can be whatever I want, even living here." Something in the simplicity of that statement touched Michael deeply. He remembered his own father, how Edward had always said that the world belonged to the strong, the clever, those who knew how to play the game of power. He had never talked about dreams, about possibilities beyond money and influence. "Your poem was very beautiful," Michael commented. "Have you been writing for a long time?" The boy shook his head. "I had never written anything until Miss Silver said I had a way with words. Now I want to be a writer." He hesitated for a moment. "Do you think I can?" The question, so simple and at the same time so profound, caught Michael off guard. In his world, opportunities were bought, negotiated, conquered through connections and influence. Here, a boy from the periphery dreamed of something that seemed impossible given the circumstances, but believed it was possible because a teacher had planted that seed of hope. "I'm sure you can," he finally replied. "If you continue writing and believing, you can definitely be a writer." The boy's face lit up. "I'm going to show my grandmother that someone besides Miss Silver believes in me." And he ran off, leaving Michael with a lump in his throat. Half an hour later, as promised, Helen returned. Most of the families had already left, and the auditorium was almost empty. "Sorry for the delay," she smiled, sitting in a chair next. To him, "There's always some last-minute detail to resolve, and my mother sometimes gets a little confused in busy environments." "No problem. It was a wonderful presentation. You should be proud." "I am," she replied, her eyes shining. Many of these children had never spoken in public before. Some could barely read at the beginning of the year. To see them today, reciting their own creations. She shook her head, as if words weren't enough to express the feeling. Michael observed her attentively. There was a genuine passion in Helen, something rare in his own social circle, where everything seemed calculated, measured, strategic. "Your mother seems to be a wonderful lady," he commented. "She is. She was my safe harbor my entire life. Now," Helen hesitated, "now the roles are reversing. The Alzheimer's is progressing slowly, but there are days when she doesn't know who I am or where she is. It's like I'm losing her in slow motion." The vulnerability with which Helen shared her reality touched him. There was no self-pity in her voice, just the serene acceptance of a painful challenge. "It must be difficult to balance work with caring for her," Michael commented, genuinely interested. "It's complicated sometimes. I have a neighbor who stays with her during school hours, but the rest of the time it's me. The medications are expensive. Specialist consultations even more so." She stopped, as if realizing she was talking too much. "I'm sorry, I don't mean to sound like I'm complaining. Thousands of families go through much worse situations." Michael felt an even greater pang of guilt. On his desk, at that exact moment, there were probably documents awaiting his signature for the acquisition of some multi-million-dollar company. The value of one of these transactions could completely change Helen's and her mother's lives. "No, I need to apologize. I admire your strength," he said sincerely. Helen smiled, changing the subject. "And you? What did you think of the children's poems? Any favorites?" "The one by the girl about truth impressed me a lot," he replied, feeling the bitter irony of his own words. "That's one of my favorites too." Jasmine has a natural talent with words. Unfortunately, her family is considering moving her to a different school because they got a partial scholarship at a private school. On one hand, I'm happy for the opportunities she'll have. On the other, Helen sighed, I'll miss her. And I suspect she'll miss this place too. Private institutions are usually great in content, but they don't always develop creativity and individual expression like we do. "I understand," Michael replied, thinking of the elite schools he had attended, where academic excellence was valued above all, but artistic expression was rarely encouraged. They talked for a while longer, about education, about literature, about small details of everyday life. Michael was surprised by the ease of the conversation, by how comfortable he felt beside her, something rare in his life marked by superficial and self-interested relationships. When it began to get dark, Helen looked at her watch. "I need to take my mother home. The taxi should be waiting already." "I could," Michael began, almost offering his private driver before remembering his character. "I could call a taxi for you if you want." "Thank you, but everything's already arranged." "It was a pleasure having you here today, Michael. It meant a lot to the children to have an attentive audience." He wanted to say that the pleasure had been all his, that that simple afternoon had been more meaningful than many of the sophisticated events he attended, but he limited himself to smiling. "Can we meet again?" he asked, surprising himself with the anxiety in his voice. Helen seemed to think for a moment. "Sure, how about lunch on Sunday? I know a simple restaurant near the municipal park. The food is good, and the price is fair." "That would be great," he replied, genuinely excited about the prospect. They exchanged phone numbers, the number Michael used exclusively for his disguised dates, and said goodbye with a quick and awkward hug. As he watched her walk away with her mother, Michael felt a growing conflict within himself. On one hand, he wanted to continue getting to know Helen, to explore that genuine connection that seemed to be forming. On the other, each moment beside her increased the weight of the lie he had created. At some point, he would have to reveal the truth and then probably lose any chance of a real relationship. On the sidewalk, away from the school's gaze, he called Roger. "You can come pick me up. I'm at the corner of Lincoln Public School." While waiting, he reflected on what he had experienced that afternoon. For the first time in years, he felt seen for who he was, not for what he owned. The irony was that Helen only saw the character he had created, a simple man with physical limitations without fortune or power. Or did she see beyond that? Could it be that somehow she saw the man behind the mask, the man that even he no longer knew who he was? The luxury car turned the corner, stopping smoothly beside him. Michael rose from the wheelchair and entered quickly, while Roger stored the equipment in the trunk. "Straight home, sir?" asked the driver. Michael looked one last time at the school that was now behind him. "Yes, home, but first, I need you to note an address. I want a package to be delivered here tomorrow." As the car glided through the city streets, Michael was already planning what he would do. An anonymous donation to the school, new computers, books, teaching materials, a small fraction of his fortune that could make a real difference in those lives. But would it just be another type of lie, another form of manipulation? Or would it be the only way he knew to express what he was beginning to feel? A feeling he couldn't name, but that made him want to be better than he was. The restaurant chosen by Helen was exactly as Michael had imagined, simple, welcoming, with wooden tables and checkered tablecloths. Nothing like the starred establishments he frequented for business dinners. The smell of home cooking filled the air, and a small line was forming at the entrance. Michael arrived a few minutes before the agreed time, again in the wheelchair, with Roger dropping him off a few blocks away. Throughout the week, he couldn't get Helen out of his mind. The meeting at the school had affected him more than he would like to admit. While waiting on the sidewalk, he thought about the anonymous gift he had sent to Lincoln Public School, a substantial donation that would allow the purchase of new computers, books, and the renovation of the small auditorium, all done through one of the smaller foundations of Castle Enterprises, without any mention of his name. Michael! Helen's voice interrupted his thoughts. She was approaching with a genuine smile, wearing jeans, a simple blouse, and a light jacket. No elaborate makeup or expensive accessories, just her natural beauty, without artifice. "Hi, Helen," he replied, feeling strangely nervous. "I hope I didn't arrive too early." "Actually, you arrived at the perfect time. This place usually fills up on Sundays. Let's go in?" The interior of the restaurant was even cozier. Entire families occupied the larger tables. Elderly couples talked calmly in the corners, and the buzz of conversations created a lively but not disturbing atmosphere. A middle-aged waitress led them to an adapted table near the window, clearly reserved in advance by Helen considering the wheelchair. The gesture of consideration touched him deeply. "This is one of my favorite places in the city," commented Helen as she looked at the handwritten menu. "Good food, fair price, and the owner knows each customer by name." As if to confirm her words, a man of approximately 60 approached the table with a warm smile on his time-marked face. "Helen, my dear." "Here, it's been a while." He hugged her affectionately. "And who is your friend?" "Frank, this is Michael. Michael, this is Frank, the owner and best cook in the city." The man extended his hand to Michael, without any trace of strangeness at the wheelchair. "Pleasure to meet you, young man. Any friend of our Helen is welcome here." "The pleasure is mine," replied Michael genuinely. "I'll prepare something special for you today. Do you trust me?" Helen laughed. "Always, Frank. You've never disappointed." When the owner walked away, Helen explained, "He was a friend of my parents. When I was a child, we came here on Sundays. After my father left, Frank always reserved a table for me and my mother, even on the busiest days." Michael observed the familiarity with which Helen treated the people around her, the waitress, the owner, even a family with children at the next table whom she briefly greeted. It was as if she genuinely belonged to that place, to that community. "It seems like you know everyone," he commented. Helen smiled. "I grew up in this neighborhood. I still live a few blocks from here, in the house where I was raised. These are my neighbors, my friends, the families of my students." She paused, looking directly at him. "And you? Where did you grow up?" The question, seemingly simple, made Michael hesitate. He was so used to lying on his dates that for a moment he didn't know what to answer. He opted to stay as close as possible to the truth, altering only the details that would identify him. "I was born in a small town, but my family moved to the city when I was 10. My father worked a lot, rarely at home. My mother tried to compensate for his absence." He paused, surprised by his own sincerity. "We didn't have much interaction with neighbors or community. It was a more isolated life." Helen observed him, attentively, as if she could see beyond the words. Sometimes more affluent families lose that community connection. They gain in material comfort, but lose in human warmth. Michael felt a slight discomfort, as if she could read his thoughts. "What makes you think my family was affluent?" Helen smiled without malice. "Your posture, your vocabulary, the way you observe this place with curiosity, like someone visiting a different world. It's not criticism, just an observation." Before Michael could elaborate a response, the waitress arrived with 2 steaming plates, an aromatic stew with seasonal vegetables and tender meat. "Frank's special recipe," announced the woman. "Enjoy." The food was delicious, Simple, comforting, full of flavor. Michael couldn't help but compare it with the elaborate meals he usually had in award-winning restaurants, accompanied by executives or dazzling women who pretended interest in his opinions. Here everything was genuine, the taste of the food, the relaxed environment, Helen's company. The conversation flowed naturally to various topics. Helen talked about her students, about the challenges of teaching in a school with few resources, about the small triumphs that kept her motivated. Michael shared stories from his childhood, carefully edited to hide his true identity, but keeping as much emotional truth as possible. "And your mother?" he asked, genuinely interested. "How is she?" Helen's face softened. "She has good days and bad days. Yesterday was a good day. She recognized me all day. We made together a recipe she loved to prepare when I was a child. This morning," she paused, breathing deeply. "This morning she woke up calling me Victoria, which was my grandmother's name. But she's calm. My neighbor Mrs. Celia is with her." "It must be difficult," commented Michael, feeling the fragility of that situation. "It's like a goodbye in slow motion," Helen replied with serene resignation. "Each memory she loses is like a small farewell. But we still have moments of lucidity, of true connection, and I'm grateful for that." Michael thought of his own mother, who had passed away 7 years ago. An aggressive cancer had taken her in just 6 months. At the time, he was so busy expanding the family business that he barely managed to be present in her final days. It was one of his biggest regrets. "Cherish every moment," he said softly. "Sometimes we're so busy with work, with ambitions, that we forget what really matters." Helen studied him with a penetrating look, as if trying to decipher something, in his words. "It seems like you're speaking from personal experience." Michael looked away, feeling exposed. "Maybe. We all make mistakes." The conversation took on a lighter tone when the owner personally brought the dessert, homemade custard with caramel sauce. Helen told funny stories about her first days as a teacher, and Michael shared anecdotes about his administrative work, all fabricated, but based on real situations from his business daily life. When they finished, Michael insisted on paying the bill, despite Helen's protests. "Please, let me reciprocate for the wonderful afternoon at the school," he argued. She reluctantly agreed. "All right, but the next one is on me." The words "the next one" made Michael's heart inexplicably accelerate. There was something about this simple and authentic woman that attracted him in a way he had never experienced before. As they left the IHE restaurant, the sky was clear and the weather pleasant, perfect for a walk in the nearby park. Helen suggested they take advantage of the day, and Michael readily agreed, even knowing he would have to maintain the wheelchair charade for longer. The municipal park was full of families enjoying the Sunday. Children ran on the grass, elderly, couples walked hand in hand, young people practiced sports. It was a portrait of the simple life that Michael always observed from a distance, from inside armored cars or from the top of luxury penthouses. "I like to come here to grade tests," sometimes commented Helen, as they followed a tree-lined avenue. "There's something in the energy of this place that helps me think better." Michael observed her with growing admiration. There was a serenity in Helen, a peaceful acceptance of life as it was, without the constant search for more that characterized his own world. "Something amazing happened at the school this week," she commented, as they stopped in the shade of a large tree. "We received an anonymous donation. New computers, books, even money for renovating the auditorium. No one knows who the benefactor was." Michael felt his face heat up, but kept a neutral expression. "That's wonderful. Maybe someone who visited the school and saw the potential of the children?" Helen smiled. "Maybe. Principal Margaret is trying to discover who it was to properly thank them, but so far nothing. It was through some foundation with a generic name. The important thing is that the children will benefit, right?" Michael diverted the subject, trying to hide his involvement. "Without a doubt, Jasmine, the girl from the poem about truth, was so happy when she found out we would have new books that she cried. She said she wouldn't need to change schools anymore." Helen shook her head, moved. "It's moments like these that make me believe it's worth continuing to fight." They continued the walk, talking about books, movies, music, discovering affinities and differences of opinion. Michael found himself genuinely laughing at Helen's stories, sharing thoughts he rarely expressed, feeling a freedom he hadn't experienced in years. When they reached a small lake in the center of the park, Helen pointed to an empty bench. "Can we rest a bit?" Michael agreed, positioning the wheelchair next to the bench where she sat. For a moment they remained in comfortable silence, observing the ducks that swam peacefully in the water. "Michael," Helen began, with a sudden seriousness in her voice. "Can I ask you a personal question?" He felt a tightness in his chest, fearing she had discovered his charade. "Sure." "Your disability, was it really caused by an accident?" Michael hesitated, torn between continuing the lie or revealing part of the truth. He opted for the middle path. "Why do you ask?" Helen looked away to the lake. "I don't know exactly. Sometimes I have the impression there's something you're not telling me. The way you move, how you manipulate the chair. It seems more recent than you let on." Michael's heart accelerated. Helen was more observant than he had anticipated. "It's complicated," he finally replied, feeling the weight of each word. "But yes, it was an accident. It changed my perspective on many things." Helen nodded without pressing further. "We all have our secrets, our unfinished stories. When you're ready to share more, I'll be here to listen." The simplicity of the response completely disarmed him. There was no judgment, only acceptance, something that Michael rarely found in his social circle, where each weakness was potentially exploited, each vulnerability analyzed as a business opportunity. They stayed, a while longer in the park, the conversation gradually returning to lighter topics. When the sun began to set, Helen looked at her watch with reluctance. "I need to go. Mrs. Celia can only stay with my mother until 6. Michael nodded, feeling a pang of disappointment at the end of the meeting. "I can call a taxi for you." "That's not necessary. I live a few blocks from here. The walk will do me good." She hesitated for a moment. "It was a wonderful afternoon, Michael. Thank you." "I should be thanking you," he replied sincerely. "Can we see each other again?" Helen smiled. "I'd like that very much. I have some commitments this week with meetings at the school, but I'm free on Friday night. We could watch a movie at the mall cinema. Nothing too sophisticated, but they're showing restored classics." "That would be perfect," Michael replied, more excited than he would like to show. They said goodbye with a quick hug, but loaded with a growing intimacy. Michael watched Helen walk away along the tree-lined path, feeling a confused mixture of emotions: happiness for the shared time, guilt for the maintained lie, and a growing terror at the inevitable revelation he would have to make at some point. When she disappeared from view, he picked up the phone and called Roger. "You can come pick me up. I'm at the east gate of the municipal park." While waiting, he reflected on his recent meetings with Helen. It was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain the charade, not just because of the lie itself, but because he felt that by deceiving her, he was losing the chance of a genuine connection, something he hadn't experienced for years. In his luxury penthouse that night, sitting in his private office with a view of the city, Michael reviewed million-dollar contracts, while his thoughts insisted on returning to a public school teacher who probably earned 1/20th of what he paid annually, just in taxes. His phone rang, the private number, used only by his sister, and the group's top executives. "Michael Castle," he answered automatically. "Michael, it's Lucy." His sister's voice sounded tired, despite the time difference between the United States and London. "We need to talk about the hotel chain acquisition. The British are hesitant about the governance clauses." "We already reviewed this last week, Lucy. What changed?" The conversation continued technical and cold, as were all interactions with his sister in recent years. Since their parents' death, both had dedicated themselves almost exclusively to business, transforming the already powerful Castle Enterprises into an international conglomerate. In the process, what little family relationship they had deteriorated, almost completely. Upon hanging up, Michael found himself contemplating an old photograph on the desk, him at 10 years old, Lucy at 8, their smiling parents in the background. An image of a family that on the surface seemed perfect, but had always been marked by absences, demands, crushing expectations. His cell phone vibrated with a message. It was Helen, thanking him again for the pleasant day and confirming the cinema on Friday. The simplicity of that message, without games, without ulterior motives, made him smile involuntarily. Michael found himself facing a growing dilemma. Each meeting with Helen made him want to reveal the truth, to show who he really was. But the fear of rejection, not for being disabled, but for being who he really was, paralyzed him. And the more time passed, the more difficult it became to confess the charade. "What dangerous game have you gotten yourself into this time, Michael?" he murmured to himself, looking at the illuminated city below, as distant as his true self seemed to be from his own life. The meeting at Castle Enterprises headquarters had already lasted 3 hours. Around the imposing mahogany table, high-ranking executives presented reports, projections, and strategies for the acquisition of a private hospital network. Michael, seated at the head, listened attentively to each word, making occasional notes on his tablet. "And with that, Mr. Castle, we project a return on investment in approximately 4 years, with an 8% margin of error." The CFO, Mark Adams, concluded his presentation with a confident smile. "The acquisition of Integrated Health Network will represent a 22% increase in the group's annual turnover." Michael observed the anxious faces around him. 12 men and 3 women, all impeccably dressed, awaiting his decision. A $30 billion empire depending on his verdict. "Which social class do the network's hospitals predominantly serve?" he asked abruptly. The question caught everyone by surprise. Normally his concerns revolved around profitability, scalability, and market positioning. "Classes A and B, sir," replied Mark, quickly consulting his notes. "Approximately 85% of patients have premium health plans or pay directly for services." Michael nodded, thoughtful. "And the hospitals in less privileged regions, in particular in the east sector of the city?" An uncomfortable silence took over the room. It was Lucy, seated to his right, who finally responded. "The network doesn't have units in the east sector, Michael. The plan is to initially consolidate presence in affluent neighborhoods and, perhaps in the future, consider expansion to other areas." Michael contemplated the information for a few moments. The east sector, where Helen's school was, where she lived, where her simple life developed. "I want a complete re-evaluation of the business plan," he finally announced, "with mandatory inclusion of at least 2 hospital units in the east sector, one of them being a complete pediatric center. Rework the projections considering partially subsidized care for low-income population." The executives exchanged confused looks. Lucy frowned, clearly uncomfortable with the change in direction. "Michael, this will completely alter the financial model," she argued. "The return would be postponed by at least 2 years, not to mention the significant reduction in profit margin." "I'm aware," he replied calmly. "I'm not asking for an opinion, I'm giving a directive. If Castle Enterprises is going to enter the healthcare sector, it won't be exclusively to serve those who already have access to everything." The meeting ended shortly after, with visibly uncomfortable executives collecting their materials. Only Lucy remained in the room, waiting for everyone to leave to confront her brother. "What was that?" she asked as soon as the door closed. "Since when did we become a charity institution?" Michael sighed, running his hand through his hair. "It's not charity, Lucy. It's social responsibility. It's thinking beyond the next quarterly report." "Does this have to do with your mysterious disappearances on weekends?" Her voice contained a mixture of irritation and genuine concern. "Roger told me he's been dropping you off at random places in the city, with express orders not to wait for you." Michael felt a pang of irritation. "Now you're monitoring my movements? Hired my driver as a spy?" "Don't be ridiculous. Roger came, to me concerned, thinking you might be in trouble. And don't change the subject. What's happening with you, Michael?" He considered telling the truth about Helen, about the dates, about how being with someone who saw him as an ordinary person, not as Michael Castle, the billionaire, was changing his perspective. But the words didn't come. "I'm just re-evaluating priorities, Lucy, that's all." She studied him with skeptical eyes, so similar to those of their deceased mother. "You know you can trust me, don't you?" Despite our differences, we're family. The word family echoed strangely. What exactly did it mean to them? Mandatory annual meetings at Christmas, formal meetings in the boardroom. The Castle dynasty had traded effective bonds for commercial ties so long ago that Michael barely remembered the last time he had a genuinely personal conversation with his sister. "I know that," he finally replied, "and I appreciate your concern, but I'm fine, really." Lucy nodded, not seeming convinced. "Just be careful, Michael. You control an empire. People depend on your decisions. You can't afford the luxury of sentimental distractions." When she left, Michael remained motionless, contemplating his sister's words. Sentimental distractions. That's how his family had always viewed personal relationships, as inconvenient deviations from the true purpose, accumulating power and wealth. He picked up his cell phone, checking messages. Helen had sent a photo of the cinema poster with the classic films, asking which he preferred to see on Friday. A simple, everyday gesture, the kind of interaction normal people had every day. He smiled, responding that he trusted her choice. Then he put the device away and returned to his desk, where a pile of reports awaited his attention. The contrast between the two worlds he inhabited had never been so glaring. The mall cinema was modest compared to the VIP rooms Michael usually frequented. Simple armchairs, popcorn without gourmet options, soda in paper cups. And yet, sitting next to Helen, he felt a satisfaction he rarely experienced in luxurious environments. "Casablanca is my favorite movie," she commented as the lights dimmed. "I hope you like it." Michael smiled. "Actually, I've never watched it. I've always heard about it, of course, but..." Helen looked at him with genuine surprise. "Seriously? An absolute classic, and you've never seen it? Well, I'm honored to introduce it to you." The movie began, and Michael found himself quickly absorbed in the story of Rick and Ilsa. The technical simplicity compensated by magnetic performances, sharp dialogues, and an impossible love story. Occasionally, he looked at Helen's profile in the half-light, observing her reactions to the scenes, the smile in the moments of humor, the teary eyes in the moments of emotion. In a certain scene, without thinking, Michael extended his hand and touched hers. Helen intertwined her fingers with his naturally, as if it were a gesture rehearsed for years. They remained that way for the rest of the film, connected by that simple touch. When the lights came on, Helen had tears in her eyes. "No matter how many times I watch it, I always get emotional at the end." "It's truly extraordinary," agreed Michael, genuinely impressed. "Rick's choice, sacrificing his personal happiness for the greater good." "Exactly," Helen became animated. "It's about doing the right thing, even when it costs everything you most desire." They left the room still talking animatedly about the film. In the cinema lobby, Michael suggested, "Can we have something to drink? There's a cafe here in the mall that looks pleasant." Helen agreed, and soon they were seated at a discreet table, she with a mint tea, he with an espresso. The conversation flowed naturally to other films, books, passing through music and eventually reaching more personal topics. "So, you never wanted to do something different?" asked Helen. "Besides administrative work, I mean." The question caught Michael off guard. In his fictional narrative, he was just a mid-level employee at some company. "Actually, I've always had an interest in social projects," he replied, getting a bit closer to the truth. "I think companies have a responsibility that goes beyond profit." Helen smiled. "That's rare these days. Most corporations seem concerned only with numbers at the end of the quarter." "Like Castle Enterprises, for example?" provoked Michael, curious to hear her opinion about his own empire. "Well, that's one of the largest, isn't it? I never understood how a single family can accumulate so much wealth while there's so much need around." Helen paused, seeming to reconsider. "Sorry, that sounded more critical than I intended. Actually, I recently read that they're planning to build hospitals in less privileged areas. If it's true, it's a step in the right direction." Michael felt a strange satisfaction hearing that news about his recent change in direction had already reached her. "It seems you're not a big fan of the ultra-rich." Helen laughed softly. It's not a matter of not liking them personally. I just think there's a fundamental imbalance when some have so much and others so little. But anyway, she lightly touched his hand on the table, let's not waste our evening talking about billionaires, right? The irony of the situation didn't escape Michael. How different would this moment be if she knew who he really was? The thought deeply troubled him. Helen, he began hesitantly, what if I wasn't exactly who you think I am? She tilted her head, curious. What do you mean? Michael felt his heart accelerate. Was it the moment to reveal everything? Here, in a mall cafe, he quickly weighed the consequences. I mean, what if my life was more complicated than it seems? Helen observed him attentively, her perceptive eyes seeming to see beyond the words. Michael, we all have complications, parts of ourselves that we don't immediately show. If there's something specific you want to tell me, I'm here to listen, but don't feel pressured to reveal anything you're not ready to share. Her balanced response, without anticipatory judgments, only reinforced how much Michael was falling in love with her, and how much he feared losing what they were building. Thank you for that, he finally said. I promise that one day I'll explain everything. I just need to find the right moment. She nodded without pressing further. They moved to lighter subjects, and soon they were laughing again. When the mall began to close, Michael offered to accompany her home. I came by car today, she explained. I can give you a ride to your apartment. Michael hesitated. His fictional address was in a middle-class neighborhood, very far from the luxury penthouse where he actually lived, but refusing without a good reason would seem strange. That would be great, he replied, resigned to prolonging the lie for one more night. Helen's car was a compact model, at least 10 years old, well-maintained, but with evident signs of age, worn upholstery, some scratches on the paint. Michael folded the wheelchair, storing it in the trunk with her help, feeling increasingly uncomfortable with the charade. During the journey, Helen told stories about the neighborhood where she grew up, about her mother before the disease, about her youth dreams. Michael listened to her with genuine fascination, imagining how it would have been to grow up in an environment where relationships mattered more than acquisitions, where people's value wasn't measured in figures. When they arrived at the address, Michael had provided a middle-class residential building. Helen parked and turned to him. It was a wonderful night, she said with a soft smile. It truly was, agreed Michael, feeling a mix of joy for the shared time and guilt for the sustained lie. There was a moment of silence loaded with expectation. Then, naturally, Helen leaned in and kissed him, a brief, delicate kiss, but loaded with promise. When she pulled away, her eyes were shining. Until next time, Michael. He got out of the car, took the wheelchair, and waved as she drove away. As soon as the vehicle turned the corner, he took out his phone and called Roger. You can come pick me up. I'm at 278 Oak Street. While waiting, Michael contemplated the growing complication he had gotten himself into. He was in love. There was no other word to describe what he felt, and each day made it more difficult to reveal the truth without destroying everything they were building. Back at his penthouse, he found Lucy seated in the living room with a grave expression. What are you doing here so late? He asked, surprised by his sister's presence. We need to talk, she replied, standing up. About your mysterious outings, about your change in behavior, and mainly, she made a dramatic pause, about Helen Silver, teacher at Lincoln Public School. Michael felt his blood freeze in his veins. How did you... Please, Michael. Did you really think you could lead a double life without me finding out? The question is, what do you intend with this absurd charade? And more importantly, her eyes hardened, do you have any idea of the risk you're running? Of the risk you're imposing on the entire Castle family? For the first time in a long time, Michael found himself without answers. The mask he had created to find something genuine threatened to crumble, exposing not only the lie told to Helen, but the truth about himself that he was just beginning to understand. So you investigated me. Michael abandoned the wheelchair in the corner of the room and walked to the bar, serving himself a neat whiskey. You hired someone to follow me? Or just bribed Roger to get more details? Lucy observed her brother with a mixture of irritation and concern. "Don't be melodramatic. Roger only mentioned your strange outings. The rest was simple deduction and some company resources. It's not difficult to discover who you're seeing when you frequent public places. And what exactly is the crime I committed? Meeting someone outside our social circle, being interested in a woman who doesn't appear in the social columns." Michael took a sip of the drink, feeling the amber liquid burn his throat. "The crime is the lie, Michael? The ridiculous charade?" Lucy pointed to the abandoned wheelchair. "Pretending to be disabled? Inventing a false identity? In what universe does that seem like a good idea?" Michael walked to the large window, contemplating the illuminated city below. From the top of his penthouse, the rest of the world seemed tiny, distant, exactly as he had felt all his life. "You wouldn't understand," he murmured. "Try to explain to me," challenged Lucy, her voice softening slightly, "because honestly I can't comprehend why my brother, one of the most powerful men in the country, needs to pretend to be someone else to have a relationship with a public school teacher." Michael turned to face her. "Have you ever thought about what it's like to be Michael Castle? What it's like to never know if people are with you for who you are or for what you have? What it's like to live surrounded by people who agree with everything you say because they're afraid of losing your favor?" "Please," Lucy rolled her eyes, "spare me the drama of the lonely billionaire. We all have our burdens." "And what's yours?" "Lucy, the pressure of spending all your fortune, the difficulty of choosing between Paris and Milan for the next weekend." The words hit Lucy like a slap. Her expression hardened. "You really have no idea, do you? No idea what it means to be a woman in this world we inherited. Of the constant scrutiny, the doubts about my competence, the doors that close even with all the money we have." She breathed deeply, regaining her composure. "But we're not talking about me. We're talking about your elaborate lie. What do you think will happen when she finds out? And she will find out, Michael. Truths always come to light." The question hung in the air, heavy and inevitable. Michael looked back at the city, as if he could find the answer in the urban landscape. "I'll tell her," he finally stated. "I'm just waiting for the right moment." And when would that magical moment be? After she's completely in love? After you convince her how different you are from other rich guys, or after the tabloids discover and publish everything, publicly humiliating her? Michael felt a wave of anger. "You think I haven't thought about this? That I don't worry about how this will affect Helen? It's exactly because I care about her that I'm hesitating. If you really cared, you would never have started this charade," Lucy retorted, implacable. "You would have been honest from the beginning." "For what? For her to judge me before even knowing me, to reduce me to a stereotype, to a magazine headline?" Michael shook his head. "For a few weeks of my life I wanted to be just a person, not a last name, not a bank account, just me." Lucy observed him silently for a few moments, her expression softening. "It's more than an adventure, isn't it? You're really in love with this woman." It wasn't a question, but Michael nodded anyway. "She sees me, Lucy. Not what I have, not what I can offer. Just sees me." His sister sighed, approaching to serve herself a dose of the same drink. "And what exactly are you seeing in the future? Will you continue with this dual identity indefinitely? Will you introduce her to the family as your girlfriend, who believes you're a middle-class administrative employee? Or will you eventually reveal everything and hope she understands and forgives your lie?" Each question was like a dagger, exposing the contradictions and impossibilities of the situation Michael had created. "I don't know," he finally admitted, the vulnerability in his voice surprising even himself. "I just know that with her I feel real. For the first time in a long time." Lucy took a long sip of her drink, considering her brother's words. "You know I can't approve of this. It's reckless, risky, and potentially destructive. For you, for her, and for our company. I'm not asking for your approval. No, you're just ignoring decades of careful family and business positioning to live a romantic fantasy." Lucy sighed deeply. But I also know I can't stop you. Just promise you'll be careful, and that you won't let this affect the company." Michael felt a sudden wave of affection for his sister. Despite their differences, she still genuinely cared about his well-being. "I promise," he replied softly. "And thank you, for not judging me even more harshly." Lucy finished her drink and placed the glass on the table. "Don't thank me yet. If this story explodes in the media and affects our stocks, you'll wish I had just been harder on you." She walked towards the door but stopped before leaving. "And Michael, tell her the truth soon, because if you don't tell her, someone certainly will, and it won't be gentle." With those words, she left the apartment, leaving Michael alone. With his conflicting thoughts and the growing certainty that his lie had become a ticking time bomb. The small cafe in the city's historic center was the kind of place Michael would never have frequented in his normal life. Exposed brick walls, rustic wooden tables, baristas with tattoos and piercings. But sitting there, waiting for Helen on a Wednesday afternoon, he felt strangely at home. They had arranged to meet during her class break, just half an hour for a quick coffee. It was little time, but Michael was beginning to value every minute in her company. Helen arrived a few minutes late, hurried and slightly breathless. "Sorry, the meeting with the coordination extended." "No problem," smiled Michael, pushing towards her a steaming cup. "I ordered your favorite, cappuccino with extra cinnamon, no sugar." Helen seemed genuinely touched by the gesture. "You remembered." "I remember everything about you," he replied, surprised by his own sincerity. She smiled, taking a sip of the drink. "How was your day?" Michael hesitated. His real day had begun with a video conference with Chinese investors, followed by a tense meeting about the hospital acquisition, and then a lunch with the city's mayor to discuss tax incentives. None of this matched his fictional identity. The usual, many spreadsheets, some boring meetings, and yours? Intense. "We're preparing the semester science fair. The students are super excited about the new resources." Her eyes shone. "You know that anonymous donation I mentioned? It completely transformed our possibilities. Jasmine is developing a project on solar energy that would never be possible without the new equipment." Michael felt a wave of genuine satisfaction. "That's wonderful. It must be gratifying to see the direct impact on the students' development." "It's the best part of the job," agreed Helen. "Seeing a child discover something new, expand their horizons, there's no better feeling." She paused, studying him with curiosity. "Do you like your job, Michael? I mean, do you really like it?" The question caught him off guard. Did he like being CEO of Castle Enterprises, controlling a financial empire, making decisions that affected thousands of lives? "It's complicated," he replied honestly. "There are aspects that satisfy me. Intellectually, solving complex problems, seeing strategies work out, but something is missing." "What?" Michael reflected. "Purpose, maybe. Real meaning, like what you find in teaching." Helen nodded understandingly. "You know, it's never too late to change, to find something that really resonates with who you are." "Would you change?" he asked, genuinely curious. "If you could do anything, regardless of financial or practical limitations?" "Honestly, no," she smiled. "I would continue teaching. Perhaps in different conditions, more resources, less bureaucracy, but the essence would be the same. I discovered my vocation." Michael felt a pang of envy. Helen had something that all his money couldn't. By clarity of purpose, genuine satisfaction in daily work. "I've been thinking a lot lately," he confessed, "about changes, about what really matters." "Because of the accident?" asked Helen softly, referring to the fictional story he had told about his supposed disability. Michael felt the weight of the lie, but replied, "Partially. Experiences like that make you re-evaluate priorities." Helen checked her watch and sighed. "I need to get back in 10 minutes. 7th grade history classes wait for no one." She hesitated, then continued. "Michael, I'm organizing a small dinner on Saturday. Just a few close friends. Nothing formal. I'd like you to come." The invitation surprised him. It was a step beyond the isolated meetings they had been having. It was entering her social circle, meeting people who were part of her life. "I'd be honored," he replied, feeling both enthusiasm and apprehension. "Can I bring something?" "Just yourself." She smiled, extending her hand to touch his on the table. "My friends are simple people like me. No formalities or pretensions." The irony didn't escape Michael. Simple people meeting the man behind one of the largest business empires in the country without having any idea who he really was. "I'll be there," he confirmed, intertwining his fingers with hers. When Helen left a few minutes later, Michael remained at the cafe observing the movement on the street through the window. Ordinary people living ordinary lives, something he had always observed from a distance, like an anthropologist studying a foreign culture. His phone vibrated. It was a message from Lucy. "Emergency meeting with the Japanese. We need you at the company in 30 minutes. Reality calling." Michael paid the bill and went out to the sunny street, where Roger was waiting discreetly a block away. As he walked, he felt divided between two worlds, the one he had built for years and the one he had recently discovered. Both real, both part of him, but seemingly impossible to reconcile. Helen's apartment was exactly as Michael had imagined, welcoming, modest, and full of personality. Shelves crammed with books, plants in colorful pots, framed photographs on the walls. A house that had been lived in, not just decorated. Seated in a wheelchair borrowed from a friend, his own would be recognizably too clean for someone supposedly dependent on it, Michael observed the small group gathered in the living room. Besides Helen, there were 5 more people. A couple of teachers from the same school, a nurse who was a childhood friend, a local musician who gave voluntary classes to underprivileged children, and Mrs. Celia, the neighbor who occasionally took care of Helen's mother. Her mother was also present, sitting quietly in an armchair in the corner, occasionally participating in the conversation with disconnected comments that everyone gently incorporated into the dialogue. Michael noticed the patience and affection with which Helen treated her mother, never directly correcting her, always finding ways to honor her participation even when confused. The food was simple and delicious: a homemade lasagna, fresh salad, artisanal bread made by Mrs. Celia. The wine was modest, served in common glasses, not in crystal flutes. The conversation flowed naturally, without the affectation or hidden agendas that characterized the social events Michael normally attended. They talked about the school, about local politics, about recently read books and watched movies. When the subject inevitably came to him, Michael carefully navigated between truths and half-truths, keeping his fictional story consistent. "And how did you two meet?" asked Clara, the nurse, with genuine interest. Helen smiled, looking at Michael with affection. "He appeared at the school for a lecture on accessibility. At the end, we wound up in a discussion about Mark Twain." Michael felt a wave of affection remembering that first meeting, the only true part of his entire fabricated story. "It was the best lecture I ever gave," he commented, provoking laughter. "Mainly because I ended up being educated by a passionate teacher who corrected my interpretations about the adventures of Huckleberry Finn." "Helen always had that ability," commented Mrs. Celia, with a maternal smile. "Since she was a girl, she defended her ideas tooth and nail. Her late father always said she should have been a lawyer. He didn't understand that I could argue and teach at the same time," replied Helen with a nostalgic smile. The conversation continued, and Michael found himself gradually relaxing, momentarily forgetting the charade he was sustaining. There was an authenticity in that circle of friends that deeply attracted him, people who had known each other for years, who shared stories and memories, who supported each other without expecting anything in return. At one point, Helen's mother suddenly stood up, seeming agitated. "I need to go home. Joseph is waiting for me." Helen discreetly explained to Michael that Joseph was her father, who had passed away more than a decade ago. With infinite patience, she approached her mother. "Mom, we are home. Joseph is traveling, remember? He'll be back tomorrow." The lady seemed confused but accepted the explanation. Helen suggested she rest a bit in the bedroom, and Mrs. Celia gently offered to accompany her. When she returned to the living room, Helen seemed slightly tired, but her smile remained serene. "Sorry for the interruption." "No need to apologize," replied Michael, taking her hand. "You're amazing with her." The comment seemed to touch Helen deeply. "I do the best I can. Some days are harder than others." The night continued with more conversations, laughter, and eventually music, when Matthew, the music teacher, picked up a guitar and began to play popular songs that everyone knew. Observing. Helen singing along with her friends, her face illuminated by the simple joy of that moment. Michael felt a tightness in his chest. He was in love, completely and irremediably in love with this woman who lived a life so different from his, but who seemed to fill a void he didn't even know existed until he met her. And with that realization came a painful certainty. He couldn't continue with the lie. He needed to tell the truth, even if it meant losing everything they were building. When the night came to an end and the guests began to say goodbye, Michael found himself alone with Helen in the small kitchen, helping her organize the last dishes. "Your friends are wonderful," he commented as she stored the clean plates. "They liked you a lot too," replied Helen, approaching for a brief kiss. "Especially Mrs. Celia. She said you have good eyes." Michael smiled, feeling simultaneously honored and guilty. "Helen, Hart, we need to talk. There's something important I need to tell you." She observed him, noticing the seriousness in his voice. "It sounds serious. What is it?" Michael breathed deeply, preparing to reveal everything. His true identity, the lie about the disability, his reasons for the charade. It was the right moment in an intimate environment, away from indiscreet gazes. But before he could begin, Helen's cell phone rang. She looked at the screen with concern. "It's the hospital. My mother is a patient there. They have my number for emergencies." She answered quickly. "Hello, yes, it's me. What, when?" Her face visibly paled. "I'm coming right now." When she hung up, her eyes were watery. "It's the mother of one of my students, Jasmine. She had a serious accident. The girl is alone at the hospital, with no close relatives in the city." She began to grab her purse and keys, hurried movements. "I need to go there." Michael nodded, understanding the urgency. "Of course, I can go with you." Helen hesitated briefly. "Are you sure? It could be a long night." "Absolutely. You shouldn't face this alone." She smiled gratefully, despite the evident concern. "What did you want to tell me?" Michael looked at her, determined even amid the crisis, prioritizing the well-being of a student above all. His revelation would have to wait. "It can wait," he replied. "Now let's go to the hospital." As they left the apartment, Michael felt the weight of the unrevealed truth, but also the certainty that he was making the right choice at that moment. Some truths, as important as they might be, needed to find their appropriate time. The truth finally came to light in Michael's penthouse, 3 days after the incident at the hospital. Not by his choice, but by a cruel twist of fate. Helen arrived punctually at 7 as arranged. The security guard conducted her by the private elevator directly to the penthouse, according to Michael's instructions. He had planned every detail, the dinner prepared by the private chef, dismissed right after finalizing the menu, the flowers, the soft lighting, the spectacular view of the city. It would be the setting for his confession. "Michael, where are we exactly?" Helen asked as she entered, looking in wonder at the luxurious apartment that occupied the entire top floor of the most exclusive building in the city. He awaited her, standing without the wheelchair, wearing an informal suit that still denounced his true financial condition. "My home," he replied simply. "The real one." Helen stared at him, confusion giving way to understanding, and finally to disbelief. "I hope you can walk." It wasn't a question. "Yes, and this is my home. And my name is really Michael, but I'm not a simple administrative employee." He breathed deeply. "I'm Michael Castle, CEO of Castle Group." The silence that followed was dense, suffocating. Helen took a few steps back, as if she needed physical distance to process the information. "Why?" Her voice came out almost in a whisper. "Why all this lie?" Michael had rehearsed this conversation countless times, but all the carefully prepared words seemed inadequate now. "In the beginning, it was an impulse. After the lecture, I just wanted a few moments of normality. without the weight of my name and my wealth influencing how people see me. And after weeks of elaborate lies, the wheelchair. Charade. Helen's voice trembled with contained indignation. It became increasingly difficult to tell the truth. The more I got to know you, the more I feared losing you when you discovered who I really am. Helen walked to the window, contemplating the panoramic view of the city, a perspective that made evident the distance between their worlds. The donation to the school. She suddenly turned. It was you, wasn't it? All that money, the equipment. Michael nodded. Yes, I wanted to do something meaningful, something that mattered to you. So besides deceiving me, you tried to buy me, buy my school, my students? No, it wasn't like that. Michael approached, but Helen retreated. It was genuine. I wanted to help. How can I believe anything you say now? Helen shook her head, tears in her eyes. Every moment we shared was based on a lie, every conversation, every confidence. My feelings for you were always true, Michael insisted, desperate. It's the only authentic thing in my life for a long time. I don't even know who you are. I'm exactly the person you met, just with a different bank account and without a disability. Everything we talked about, everything we shared, that was real. Helen looked at him for a long time, the disappointment evident in her gaze. You really don't understand, do you? It's not about your fortune or your status, it's about trust. She picked up her purse. I need to go. Don't follow me, please. Helen, wait, we can talk about this. But she was already in the elevator, the doors closing between them, a perfect metaphor for the abyss that his lie had created. Michael stood motionless, feeling the weight of his choices. The dinner cooled untouched, the candles melted slowly, the city continued its dance of lights. Below, indifferent to the drama unfolding at the top of the building. His phone rang. It was Lucy. How did it go? Asked his sister. It's over, he replied simply. She's gone. There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. I'm sorry, Michael, truly. She was right to leave. I built everything on a lie. And now? Michael contemplated the city below, feeling more alone than ever at the top of his empire of glass and steel. Now, I think I finally understood the real cost of truth and of lies. The story of Michael and Helen ends here in this episode, but like any good narrative about truths and lies, there are always more layers to be explored. And have you ever experienced a situation where you had to choose between a comfortable lie and a painful truth? To continue navigating this universe of stories that explore contemporary dilemmas, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Each week we bring new narratives that, like Love in the Times of Capitalism, invite reflection on who we are and what we truly value. Leave your like if this story touched your heart and share your impressions in the comments. We want to know, do you believe Michael still has a chance to regain Helen's trust? Can love survive a lie of this magnitude? For those who want more similar content, we've prepared a special playlist with stories of unlikely encounters and connections that challenge social expectations. You can find the link in the description of this video. After all, as Michael discovered the hard way, true wealth isn't in the skyscrapers we build, but in the bridges we dare to create between seemingly distant worlds. See you in the next episode.